Alright, week 14, or 13, or 15, or whatever week it is. It's my final week. This week in class, we presented our project for movies, which were each about 15, 20 minutes long. So we watched 3 of those. My group's was on GPS, Global Positioning Systems. The other groups did presentations on laser, which stands for Light Amplified by Stimulated Emissions of Radiation. And the other group did a presentation on MRI, which stands for Magnetic Resonance Imaging. Both were pretty good presentations. I felt our presentation went pretty well. And then after that, we just answered some questions that people had about our topic. And then we also watched an honors project movie that one of our students did on the physics of aviation, which was a very interesting video as well. This week, interestingly enough, I learned a little bit about Google image searching, which is kind of random, but I had to do it a lot for the last project, and I learned that there is an option for advanced search. Don't judge that I didn't know that before, but anyway, I found that, and that helped a lot for finding specific pictures instead of just generalized GPS pictures, since I was searching that. I was looking for pictures on that topic a lot for the last project. I also learned about laser from one of the groups, and then MRI from the other group. I learned a few things about the physics of flight from one of the honor students, and I also learned some things from going to the music museum, which was very interesting as well. This week for questions, I don't really have any questions, seeing as it's the very last week. I know what I need to get done by Sunday night, and then we have our interview on Monday morning. So I guess it's just, at this point, it's just getting everything done and finishing the semester strong. Goals for this week, I guess, would be to finish all my classes strong. Other than finishing up a few loose ends of the physics class, there's not really much. I finished my semester video and just doing a couple other things in my notebook, making sure that's up to date. So I guess just finishing all that stuff up. In my other classes, getting good grades in my other classes, but not a huge section on goals for this week, but those would be the main ones. Alright, so now I'm going to talk a little bit about the other group's projects and what they presented to us last week in class. The first group did a presentation on laser, like I said before, and that was on light amplified by stimulated emissions of radiation. I thought it was a pretty good presentation. They were focusing specifically on laser hair removal, so they got a couple interviews from people in that kind of field of expertise. They talked about how melanin is the substance in hair which attracts the light of the laser to the hair, and that's like how they remove hair like permanently, I guess, with lasers. They also touched on how lasers remove tattoos now as well, which we obviously all know is available, but causes severe scarring and can damage your skin like permanently, seeing as tattoos are permanent. So they had a pretty good video. They had solid interviews. The only complaint I had about it was the study guide had been printed off Google Docs the morning of, so it was like really small text and kind of hard to read, and a little hard to follow, like answer the questions, but I think they did a pretty good job, and their video was really good. The other group did a presentation on MRI, which stands for Magnetic Resonance Imaging, and they talked about how it's used for chemical and physical analysis. They talked about the 4 main parts of MRI, which are magnets, the magnet, which polarizes the water molecules, the gradient coil, which varies the frequency in each part of the body, the radio frequency coil, releases the resonance frequency, which flips the water molecules, and finally the receiver, which receives the photons that are emitted from the water molecules. So those were a couple things they touched on during their presentation. They also mentioned that the entire room which the MRI machine is in is covered in copper to keep the radio frequency inside. So they had a lot of good information. Their handout was really good, and it was really thorough, so props to them on that. Their video quality was not that great. I just don't think they had a very good camera, because the audio was kind of, you could just hear a lot of like white noise, and you couldn't necessarily hear like what they were talking about or what the interviewees were talking about. So that was kind of a little bit of a downfall of their presentation. But like I said, that probably wasn't their fault. They probably just didn't have a very good camera. The video also could have been put together a little better, but I mean, not everybody can, use iMovie quality software to make their movies, so that's not necessarily their fault either. But it was a pretty good presentation. I learned a few things from it. And then finally, one of the students did a honors presentation on the physics of flight. It was really interesting and informative and entertaining. I liked how he used the song Danger Zone throughout the whole thing, and it was just kind of repeating for the whole entire thing. He mentioned the different forces that work on a plane during its flight, which are lift, thrust, weight, and drag. He demonstrated it with his own remote control plane, and he showed us some graphs, the type of graphs we were using in the first project, the position versus time, velocity versus time, and acceleration versus time. And then he even put together a Logger Pro analysis of it, so that was pretty cool. And yeah, overall it was pretty good, and definitely think he deserved an A on that one. And then lastly, Alex and I stopped by the Music Museum this week, and we didn't have very much time, so we didn't get to like thoroughly go through it. But we both agreed that we could have spent probably like a whole entire day, if not another day there, because it was just really interesting. We spent, about 10 minutes in each section. We got to see some instruments that they make in Africa, the Middle East, Europe, Latin America, Asia, and of course the United States, which was our favorite part because we both play music, so it's just looking at musical instruments are just like, cool, and playing them is even better. So it's kind of crazy how in the foreign countries they make instruments out of pretty much anything they can find, like anything on the ground could be an instrument to them, which is just kind of insane, but it's also kind of awesome at the same time. So that was fun. I'd like to go back so I could learn a little bit more and spend a little more time in each section, but overall it was a pretty cool experience. So yeah, that just about wraps up my final weekly. Thanks for the great semester, and I guess I'll see you around campus maybe sometime.